I know we're the last session, but we promise to make it very interesting. So market integration and regional collaboration are crucial for a sustainable and resilient future. Much has changed in the global energy systems in the past few decades, with technological advancements leading to new sources of energy supply and increasing focus on decarbonization. Originally, it was socioeconomic and environmental concerns that has led to the kickstart of the energy transition, but we're witnessing increasingly, particularly in developing countries, that the energy transition's main drivers are energy security and economics. So to accommodate for the energy systems of the future, collaboration on several levels is going to be highly needed. However, to optimize this collaboration and market integration, we need to have a robust cooperative security framework. So the success of market integration in Africa hinges largely on a cooperative security framework that would be the foundation of a stable, secure, and efficient markets. And that could lead to the development of sustainable economic growth and sustainable development. In order to identify how and shape the market regulation and framework for this, and how market actors interact among themselves, but also among intergovernmental bodies, to ensure energy securities, I'm joined by esteemed speakers to discuss the evolving role of energy security, sustainable integration approaches, and deep dives into the potential of clean technologies and their needs for cooperation. Here we have Mr. Leonardo Bellodi, adjunct professor, Luis Business School in Rome, Afaf Darkik, senior economist, Policy Center for the New South in Rabat, and Giacomo Luciani, scientific advisor, Sciences Po, Paris. I'm going to start with you, Leonardo, to put kind of a perspective, a context for this, and if you can tell us more on the energy security role in the framework of the new international landscape.
Thank you. Well, Jessica, more or less you said everything we need to know at the beginning of your
We're going to wrap the plan.
And, well, first of all, let me thank NATO Different College, and especially the chairman, Ambassador Minuto Rizzo, who is always very active in organizing, workshops, seminars, and so on. So I have three, let's say, quick remarks, and on which we can elaborate later on. The first one is, I couldn't think about any other subject than energy so interlinked with geopolitics. You cannot talk about geopolitics without speaking about energy and vice versa. So each time we deal with geopolitics, we have always an energy topic. And the energy is driven by geopolitical drivers, geopolitical relationship, and geopolitical issues, of course. The second one, quite quick, is that our human nature, let's say. It's a bit weird, We always try to act in a very quick way, think deep when we face an emergency. Once the emergency is gone, well, we tend to forget about it. We sit in our daily job, family relations as well. From time to time we take care about wife, husband, missus, and so on. When we have a problem, when everything's going pretty well, we don't really, I'm going to say we don't care, but still, business as usual. Each time we have an emergency, we are really focusing, on it. Well, same is for, the energy matters. As you know, a couple of years ago, everybody was focused on the peak of the prices, the possible shortage of gas because of the Russian issue, if I may say so. Everybody was really concerned about the dependence of the European member states on the Russian import of gas. So everybody was focused on it. China was piling, stocks of gas, as Italy did, by the way, and other countries as well. So everybody was trying to find a solution and to try to cut our dependence on the Russian gas, to diversify routes and countries of import from which we imported gas. Now the situation is completely different. It's completely different because storages are full. Winter was quite mild, and so it seems that the emergency is over. We shouldn't, and we are not any longer worried. Prices are, except now for the oil peak, but for the barrel, but gas prices are pretty good. The bill of the consumers of utilities is lower than two years ago. So everything seems quite set. But it's not fixed at all. We still may face such a problems in the future. We have, of course, diversified our routes, our importing countries. But still, and in 2023, for example, we imported a lot of LNG from Russia. 10 billion of BCM, 10 BCM, so billion cubic meters. We are importing gas from the US, but some consumers and some industry in the US, are complaining about it because the more they export, the more they pay, of course, at the domestic level. So there are some movements in the US that say to the government, please, give some license. Stop it, or think about it, because we need the gas. And the more you export, the more the price will increase. We have diversified our routes, for example, as I mentioned, and we import a lot of gas through the south corridors. Turkey, for example. But even this country, are we sure that we can trust it? We can really trust it. We see how many problems there are in Ankara. You see that, for example, the European institutions are not very happy about what's going on with the freedom of press, with the political movements, and so on. So we are, let's say, between a rock and hard place. On one side Russia, on the other side, one side Moscow, on the other side Ankara. Nothing is very easy. We import from North Africa. We import a lot of gas from Algeria, Libya, Egypt. But even these countries are quite, they might face some problems in the future. Speaking about Libya, now, of course, everybody, again, the human nature, everybody is focusing on, rightly so, on what's happening in Ukraine, in Iran, of course, in Israel. But the problems in Libya are still there. And there are huge problems. And we import gas from Libya. So nothing is, behind us. We might face the same problems. We were very lucky. We were very lucky for several reasons, even because we didn't stop importing from Russia. We were very lucky because of what happened with the mild winter. But what next? So, speaking about, of course, the infrastructure, of course, it's time now to build new infrastructure in Europe, to improve our interconnections. We cannot import gas, for example, in South Europe or from North Europe, because we lack interconnection. So it's time now to think about it, even if we are any longer in emergency. Then I would talk about the energy transition. Well, just to avoid any kind of misunderstanding, I think that we need the energy transition. I think that we need get rid in the future of the hydrocarbons, especially gas, of course, oil, and, well, in order of priority, coke, oil, and gas, let's say. So I think that is of essence for all of us, for our sons and so on, to build the world without, with more and more renewables. So I'm pro the energy transition. But two remarks.
Can I ask you
Yeah.
to limit this for 1 minute?
Yes.
Otherwise,
Well,
I'm going to be
sorry,
held
sorry,
accountable.
sorry. Just so to remark. The first one is you should notice that in 2022 or 23, I don't remember, 22, we have a peak in the oil production since ever. And second one, and then I try to limit it to the 30 second, is we import gas. We are a lot of countries, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Tunisia as well, for some reasons, a lot of countries which are state rentier. So the income of such states the income is from the revenues of the sales of oil and gas. And these countries, everything is subsidized by the state. So let's assume that tomorrow we get rid of oil and gas. Well, what will happen to such a population? What do they do? How the state will finance the people, will subsidize the people, will pay the bread, will pay the salaries and so on. If you look at it, which is I don't have any answer about it, but if you look at the problem, you see that we face a gigantic problem. What they will do without their revenues? Abu Dhabi and Doha, well, they are, of course, diversifying their economy, But North Africa and Africa, in essence, they are not doing it. They still are counting on such revenues. So what they will do, and what we will do, because of course we may face a lot of economic immigration, because they will get rid of money. That's it.
Thank you.
Sorry for being very quick.
I had a question for you, but I'm going to keep it just if we have time, just so everyone doesn't hate us for keeping them from what's coming next.
It's your fault because the time
I know.
didn't work.
It's like I need to tell them to cut the microphones. Afaf, we get to you, and in order to identify, of course, sustainable collaboration, we have to look into the current status and the current challenges in order to identify the path forward and what approaches are actually working. Can you please walk us through that?
Sure. I think, like the rest of the panelists, I had the whole thing prepared, but so much has been said. So I'm going to go right to the chase. I think there are two certain paths for global economic development in the future. One is green growth, or call it climate neutral growth or clean growth, as long as there is growth. And the second one is Africa as the final frontier. There is so much that still has to be done in Africa. I'm just going to take the example of Morocco, for instance. We have a Morocco energy strategy of 2040, reaching 52% installed capacity in renewable energy. We have the green hydrogen roadmap. So a lot of seawater desalination stations also because of competition over resources. We also have, we are also hosting the World Cup, so we need interconnections. We're building a fast railroad. We need roads. We need schools. We need. So much still needs to be done in Africa. In terms, if we speak about the continent, as we said, lack of access to electricity, lack of access to clean cooking, a big blackout problem, which actually costs the continent 5% GDP every year. We also have an electricity mix that is still dominated by fossil fuels. As it has been said before, it represents about 80% of the electricity generated. So the idea is that there is so much to be done, but the public budgets are extremely constrained with debts, but also with other important socioeconomic projects. There's also the question of the cost of capital in Africa. It's one of the highest in the world, if not the highest. To give you an example, it is 5 times the weighted average cost of capital in China and other developed countries. And that is why, actually, Africa received only 1.5% of private sector investments in renewable energy in the world, which is only about 3.2 billion compared to 2.8 trillion worldwide. There's also, the literature also points to lack of technical and human skills. So basically, individually, African countries cannot make it, which actually underscores the importance of collaboration between African countries, but also North-South or South-North cooperation. And there's actually a saying in Africa that goes, alone you can go faster, but together we will go further. And the case in point is the regional approach to addressing energy deficiency in Africa, which is not new, actually. It dates back to the 1950s, the 1970s, but more recently in the 1990s through the regional power pools. One of the most successful ones is the Southern African power pool, but I think it was because it was driven by more than the economic rationale, but also by post-apartheid South Africa wanted to play the role of regional leader and also being neighborly to its nearby countries. And this was prompted actually by extreme climate events in the 1990s that compromised the hydropower capacities in Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. So there was some kind of complementarity that could be created between renewable energies and coal power plants that existed and surplus that existed in South Africa at the time. What we want to go in the future, what we want to achieve is supporting renewable energy through this regional power integration. And this can be done easily because of spatial and temporal synergies that can be achieved through regional collaboration. And regional power pools also present an important business case because of their scalability, meaning that it is much less expensive to invest in a regional manner rather than in individual countries, and also because individual countries don't have the means. So, as it has been said before, it can lead to extensive cost cutting. Some studies indicate, for example, in the region of the ECOWAS, about 30 billion savings, which is not nothing. But overall, these integration efforts have not been very successful. There is a lack of trust among countries, unwillingness to liberalize electricity markets because mostly for social reasons. Of course, again, deficit in investments in generation and transmission nationally, and also more of bilateral trade, power trading than regional power trading, which is understandable. But where I want to go is that through the Free Continental Trade Agreement, things might move in the right direction for Africa, for African regional power pools. First, because, as it has been said before, it intends to scale investments in infrastructure, and one of these is the African single electricity market. The second reason is that there will be arbitration and dispute resolution mechanism, which can resolve some of the cross-border limitations to cooperations. And finally, because it has been built on Agenda 2063, on the Paris Agreement, it is more prone to supporting renewable energies. Do I still have time?
8 seconds.
I think I will stop here.
Since you finished on time, that gives me the opportunity to ask you a difficult question, actually. So you've mentioned the high cost of capital, high cost of finance in Africa. Can you tell us the major risks that are leading to the cost of finance, cost of lending being so high, and what can we do better in the future?
Obviously, there is high real and perceived risk, which adds another layer to the high cost of capital. Real risks obviously lie in security reasons. I want to say also corruption, lack of project implementation. I think these are the main risks, and lately also geo-economic risks due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the inflation that has been driven following the Ukraine-Russia war.
Thank you. Last but not least, Giacomo, we get to you if we can deep dive into a technology, hydropower. If you can walk us into the potential in sub-Saharan Africa and why would regional cooperation be important in clean technologies, particularly hydropower?
Thank you. In fact, I plan to concentrate on a form of energy which has barely been mentioned so far. It has not been mentioned on the podium at all. There was a question about it, and that is hydropower. And I find it quite surprising that when we speak about renewable energies and the energy transition, we immediately and exclusively think in terms of solar and wind and do not ever mention hydropower. It is surprising because solar and wind are clean sources and renewable sources, but they are not dispatchable. We do not control them, and that means that we cannot guarantee their availability when we need them. Some people say that they are variable. The problem is not that they are variable. They are variable. The problem is that we don't control them, okay? And that has important technical and economic consequences that need to be taken into account. Now, the fact is that sub-Saharan Africa especially has huge untapped hydropower potential, which is rarely mentioned. I have prepared some slides. Maybe if you can...
yeah, we're having one technical issue with the slides, but we're working on this.
They are not terribly important, but, you know, I think it's important to have some idea of the importance of hydropower. Hydropower is a clean source. It is renewable. For some reason, it has not a very good press, you know. Mostly when you read about hydropower, it's about the negative consequences of hydropower. However, you know, we should be aware of the fact that in this life there is no free lunch. Everything always has some negative consequences, and it's a matter of finding solutions to accommodate or alleviate the negative consequences and enjoy the positive aspects. Hydropower is being promoted everywhere in the world. There is very large investment, especially, you will not surprise, in China, where, you know, China leads investment in energy in all fields, in nuclear, in renewables, solar and wind, and in hydropower. But there is large investment also elsewhere in Asia, in Europe, in North America, in South America. The only place where the investment is minimal is Africa. In Africa, less than 10% of the potential is being exploited at the moment. There are huge, well-known projects that have been on the table for ages, in some cases for a century or more. And they are well identified, and they could be pursued, but they are not being pursued. Why? Typically because there is a problem of size. The importance of these projects and the amount of electricity that they would be able to generate outsizes the size of the local market. And so it is very difficult to set up a proper project financing scheme, guarantee a cash flow that will remunerate the initial investment, and the initial investment is large. But, you know, it's not unfeasible, it's just large, and it needs a guarantee of market and cash flow to come with it. And that is where international cooperation is needed. I will mention just one possible utilization of hydropower, and that is the production of hydrogen. The European Union is claiming that we will progressively substitute our dependence on methane, on natural gas, with hydrogen, and the possibility of having e-fuels has been, synthetic fuels has been mentioned earlier. Now, you know, I don't understand why we always identify hydrogen, couple hydrogen only with solar and wind when this coupling is extremely difficult. Electrolyzers don't work very well if they don't have a steady supply of electricity. If they depend on solar power, they will be able to work for even in the Sahara for, say, 2,000 hours out of 1,760 hours that there are in a year, and that is obviously generating hydrogen at high cost. Instead, hydropower can allow operating electrolyzers for many more hours, and it can allow to diversify our sources of hydrogen much more effectively than purely. So it's difficult to understand why certain countries are looking forward to importing hydrogen from Saudi Arabia, as if we didn't have enough already to depend on Saudi Arabia. It's easier to understand why they are aiming at importing hydrogen from Morocco, and that is one thing that my former colleague, Minister Leila Ben Ali, is promoting, but the potential in Africa is much vaster. With the important difference that hydrogen is difficult and expensive to transport, and therefore creates a strong interest for local utilization of the source and transformation locally. And we are going to depend on sub-Saharan Africa for metals that are needed for our batteries for a long time to come. And there is a possibility of not exporting simply the ores, but transforming and refining locally and transforming the natural resources of these countries into semi-finished products and import semi-finished products. This is really a perspective that allows for very significant economic and security, because it's extremely dangerous to develop dependence on a limited number of hydrogen supplier for which we don't have a market and we don't have flexibility. Thank you. I'm sorry for
Thank you.
too much time.
You mentioned, I have one question before we open questions to the audience. You mentioned guaranteed cash flow. Do we worry with climate change on having a negative impact on hydropower and thus negatively impacting this cash flow?
Climate change has a negative power on everything, of course. It does also have a negative power on hydropower, a negative effect on hydropower. It increases, it creates some volatility where it did not exist. However, the volatility is limited in the sense that, the sun shines during the day, it does not shine at night, zero at night, okay? Hydropower may, if you have a low rain season, a drought, you can have a reduction of 20, 30%, which of course is important, but it's not zero.
Okay, thank you. Do we have questions in the audience? Yes. Can we have a microphone, please? Here, and then we have a question.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Just a quick remark. I very much like the hydrogen angle. What I would maybe just remark is to say that it's extremely important to make sure that there are very tangible local benefits coming from hydrogen projects if significant amounts are going to be exported to Europe, because there are still many pain points from the colonial era, and the last thing you want to have is to have those come to the surface again. So yes, people have to, you cannot have energy poverty and stuff going out of the country. You have to bring those two things together.
I had, excuse me, the gentleman in blue, and I'll back to you in 1 second.
I'm Gregorio Bajani. I'm an analyst for the post-Soviet space. I wanted to ask, wouldn't it be expedient for NATO and EU to take care seriously of the development, energy development of Africa, because of the fact that our competitors could get hold of this matter and gain popularity and political leverage in Africa? I mean, Russia and China.
Does anyone would like to answer that?
Well, I may just a couple of quick remarks. NATO in this very moment is, of course, very focused on the security of infrastructure of the members. There are a working group on it. They met several times on the security infrastructure because, of course, we may have some problems in this very moment. Europe is changing course of action, hopefully. In the past, and I think it was a quite huge mistake, the European institution, especially the Commission, was very keen, was very eager and keen to develop and to build a perfect internal market. So we have a lot of directives of, unbundling, ownership unbundling. So try to, don't have any longer vertical integration of the energy sector. So at the end of the day, what we did, we created a perfect internal market without caring about, what happens outside. So everybody was happy inside, kind of, but outside we have a completely different world. I think it was a quite huge mistake. So European institutions are trying now to catch up. They have a lot of programs in Africa, for example. Of course, we have a problem to put together all the member states, and everybody has different views. We see nowadays, for example, what happens between France and Italy. We have, kind of tiny different views of our African behavior. But still, I think that a lot has been done since, few years. But we lost a lot of time in the 90s and early 20s and early 2000s.
Thank you.
I think, if I may add, not
Yeah,
only has a lot been done, but also European countries, development assistance from European countries towards African countries has been a major source of development finance in Africa. And it has been put, black on white in Europe's comprehensive strategy with Africa, where it shows that Europe actually financed more than 200 billion euros in development finance only in 2017. And actually the US comes very far at 60 billion, and then China. So Europe is actually playing a huge part in development finance in Africa.
Thank you.
And the energy sector is the primary sector where development finance goes.
Thank you for clarifying this. Would you like to add anything?
Just to say that Russia is not investing in energy in Africa. China is. China is the only country that is investing in hydropower in Africa in these days. And it's difficult to complain about this. Actually, we should congratulate because they have the courage to do so. We don't. And we should learn from their examples and meet the challenge. All these people that complain about the Chinese initiative and the Belt and Road, and the answer to that is to match and compete rather than criticize what China is doing.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience, sir.
Yes. My name is Carlo Trezza. I'm a member of the executive board of the NATO Foundation. I am ashamed to show my ignorance, but I have a question for Dr. Luciani. How do you pass from hydroelectric energy to the production of hydrogen?
Yes. You do so through a process called electrolysis, which consists in splitting the atoms of the molecules of water, which contain hydrogen and oxygen, and separating the hydrogen from the oxygen. This is an electrical process that is conducted through a machine called electrolyzer. And there are different technologies of electrolyzer, but the most common and frequently used and cheapest technology, which is alkaline electrolyzers, does not easily tolerate variable supply of electricity. So you are in this dilemma. If you want clean hydrogen, as the European Commission wants, you have to support it with clean electricity, okay? And clean electricity, if it comes from solar and wind, is not stable. So it will not allow the electrolyzers to work. They work, but not optimally, okay? So in order to have a system that works optimally, you need a steady supply of electricity, and hydropower can provide that. Nuclear can provide that as well. And so actually, I didn't say anything about nuclear, but I believe that we should be promoting nuclear in Africa as in Europe, because these are the two pillars of the decarbonization of our energy supply.
Other questions? Yes. Can we have the microphone, please?
Hello. I can never tell if this thing is on or not. My name is Gavin Shaw. I'm from Lewis University. I asked a question earlier. Thank you to all of the presenters on the panel right now. It was a very interesting discussion, and it's been very engaging. I had a question about water sensitivity. especially concerning, like we're talking a lot about hydroelectric solutions. And we just had a really good conversation on diversification, bringing it not just into a single solution, not just relying on hydrocarbons, not relying solely on water or wind or solar, or even nuclear, but to bring it into the perspective of that. So I think, like, especially for Ms. Zarkik, you're from Morocco, I believe. You're working in Rabat.
Yes.
So Morocco and even Saudi Arabia that we were talking about before are very water-sensitive countries. They have a lot of difficulty providing water, and they have to essentially work to provide some kind of fresh water. So I was wondering how exactly it is that we can invest with NATO into these large projects. Like what exactly is the starting point? Do we consolidate our funding between a single, let's say, financial institution to kind of handle that, maybe through the IMF or through another World Bank, or do we do we look into other solutions? Do we diversify, and do we look at privatizing and going into these kinds of solutions for diversified energy solutions?
Can you make the answer in 2 minutes max, please?
I'll try. So development finance. As I said earlier, the public budgets in Africa are quite strained. Unless Mia Mottley's plot to reverse the global financial architecture works in the next couple of days, that's not going to be successful for us. So what we need to do is attract either the private sector or multilateral development institutions. In order to attract the private sector, we need to give them proper foundations, regulations, attraction, stuff like that. One of the ways of doing so is through power purchase agreements, which can mitigate certain risks, foreign exchange risk, regulation change risk, termination risks, and so on. Otherwise, what I was trying to say before my time was up is that we should find actually regional approaches of giving development aid to Africa instead of bilateral approaches. For example, in the case of the EU, as I said earlier, it is a huge development finance provider to many African countries. What I want to see more of in the future is more regional approaches. It can be extremely cost efficient, as I said before. It can create scalability in the continent and scale investment in infrastructure. The second point that I want to make is that we can also collaborate in terms of institutional knowledge sharing, because obviously the EU is definitely the leader in terms of working together in terms of developing renewable energies. And finally, the point that I was trying to make is that I wrote it down so that I don't forget it, is that flow of technologies in certain areas, such as these very fundamental needs of electricity, should be made available to development countries in the future.
Thank you, Afaf. We have one final question before we get to the speaker's concluding remark.
I am a strong believer in hydropower, coming also from a country which is the strongest one in the world for hydropower, which is Canada. I remember when I went in my jobs in Africa, in Congo, that Mobutu, when he finished the dam in Matadi, had proposed to make an electrical line till the Mediterranean to supply electricity to the countries from Congo up to the Mediterranean Sea. I was child when the dam on the Zambezi was built. Now that dam gives electricity to Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe. At least these are the countries I know. I'm not sure if it gives also to part of South Africa, to Botswana, and to the countries around. So hydropower, strange enough, in Italy, we had the strongest network of dams. The uncle of my wife was teaching electricity and other things from Yugoslavia, was bringing students to see how the dams were built and functioning. All of a sudden, we decided to shut them down and to convert to oil. And I think that was the biggest crime. So this is a comment, it's not a question.
Thank you.
Which should lead us for some deep reflection. Thank you.
Thank you for this food for thought. We're going to close with closing remarks. 50 seconds per speaker. And I start with you, Leonardo. A final thought.
A final thought. Well, I think that the key word, given now the gender balance, the queen word, let's say, should be diversification. Diversification from the sources of supply. Everything we need nuclear, we need hydro, we need unfortunately still oil, gas, wind, solar, and so on. So diversification of the source of supply, diversification of the routes of supply. Of course, it will be very important because if we diversify the sources of supply, but we don't have, a diversification of the routes, we still have the same problem of security. So diversification is the key word or the queen word for NATO, for the European institution, and so on. I think that everybody has to work on it. And then, finally, we need infrastructure. Infrastructure not only will help the country in which they are built, but they will enhance the security of supply for everybody.
Thank you. Afaf?
I would say private sector support. As I've said earlier, there are means to include the private sector in infrastructure developments in Africa, one of which is through power purchase agreements, because energy infrastructure can involve very large costs, and they're often in bilateral monopolies between private sector and public sector party. So the stakes are very, very high for the private sector, which need reassurance. Over the past, African countries, with the ways of doing so were by subsidizing the energy sector, which creates wider inefficiencies across the system. And the second way of doing so was by guaranteeing these projects, which also very costly for African countries. And this can no longer be the case because of debt crisis in Africa. So we need legitimate private sector investments in a win-win approach. And the second way of doing it is through regional integration.
Thank you. Giacomo?
I think two words. We need pragmatism and courage. Pragmatism means to recognize facts, and facts tell us that the only countries that have succeeded in decarbonizing are countries that rely on hydropower and nuclear, with some support from solar and wind, but the list of countries that have the lowest carbon content is all countries in which hydropower and nuclear are very important. Courage, because we need to invest and not just preach, and we need to be open to risk and provide equity, not just loans for important investment projects. And take a leaf out of the experience of Norway. Norway is a country that produces a significant amount of fossil fuels that it exports to Europe. It's a very significant member of NATO and component of European energy security. It entirely relies on hydropower. Sweden, the new member of NATO, relies on hydropower and nuclear, and they don't use a cubic meter of gas. They export it. So that is what Africa should be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of things to think about and to do. Join me in a round of applause for the speakers for their valuable insights, and a round of applause for the audience. And please stay with us for the closing remarks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lovely meeting.
I liked how you insisted on and nuclear energy. Thank you.
Yeah, we can take it down. Thank you.
I hope you like it.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We are waiting for the final speaker. Rick, please. Well, it's a great pleasure for me please, to introduce Hooker. He comes straight from the United States, last minute call, and he goes to Fontana di Trevi at the same time, so he likes Rome. He's a former dean of the college and a renewed scholar and a military person at the same time, a good friend. And I think that an American voice perhaps at the end can be, energize us a little bit on an overall scenario.
I'll do my best. Thank you. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be asked to offer some closing remarks to round out what I think we'd all agree has been a fascinating and I hope a productive series of discussions today. While much attention today, I would say, is rightfully directed towards the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, the long-term stability and prosperity of Europe is also directly linked to that of the African continent, as we've heard all afternoon long. And perhaps surprisingly, much work and significant investment have been undertaken in recent years in this regard. I'm going to speak a bit about the European Union, which, because of its role in economic development and governance, obviously is a leading institution. And then I'll weave in some comments about what I see as NATO's role towards the end. So a leading effort in this regard is the African-EU Energy Partnership, a long-term framework for strategic dialogue between the EU and the African continent, which is aimed at sharing knowledge, setting common political priorities, and developing joint programs on key energy issues of interest to Europe and to Africa. It's one of the partnerships adopted under the Joint Africa-EU Strategy, which was signed by 80 African and European heads of state and government at the 2007 Lisbon Summit. The overall objective of the partnership is to improve access to secure, affordable, and sustainable energy for both continents, with a special focus on increasing investment in energy infrastructure in Africa. As one example, a major project aims to lay the world's longest high-voltage submarine cables for 2,300 miles from giant energy farms in the Moroccan desert to southwest England, from where it could provide up to 8% of the United Kingdom's electricity. And the cost of this project alone is set at 22 billion euro. Another example is the submarine cable project now underway to carry 3,000 megawatts of power from Egypt to Greece with a budget of 3.5 billion euro, replacing 4.5 billion cubic meters of fossil gas each year. The commitment to the partnership was renewed by both the EU and the African Union during the 6th EU-AU summit in Brussels, which took place in February of 2022, where an investment package of approximately 150 billion euro was announced to support the continent's common ambitions for Agenda 2030 for the EU and the African Union Agenda for 2063. Now, the investment package is part of the Commission's Global Gateway Strategy to support investment in sustainable infrastructure worldwide. And through Global Gateway, the EU supports a number of flagship projects in Africa, including in the energy sector. In the context of this 6th European Union-African Union Summit, the EU also proposed a new Africa-EU Green Energy Initiative within the Global Gateway investment package. It will support large-scale, sustainable electrification programs on the African continent with the goal of transforming the prospects for African people and helping the economy to grow by addressing three priorities. By 2030, the EU-Africa Green Energy Initiative aims to provide at least 100 million people with access to electricity, and 3.4 billion euro in EU grants will be delivered through Team Europe to support renewable energy, energy efficiency, the just transition, and the greening of local value chains. And part of this will be used to leverage private sector investments via guarantees and blending under the European Fund for Sustainable Development. The initiative also proposes to promote new opportunities for cooperation on clean hydrogen production in Africa through 4 modes of cooperation: research, regulation, investments, and trade. Another initiative is the Just Energy Transition Partnership, a global collaboration conceived to help emerging economies on their transition away from fossil energy and towards clean energy in a way that also addresses social issues and economic challenges. The EU signed, together with the governments of France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the US, a similar agreement with South Africa in November of 2021, and under this partnership they will provide financing of more than 3 billion euro to support South Africa's climate commitments. And in Paris in June of 2023, France, Germany, the EU, the United Kingdom, and Canada signed a joint partnership mobilizing another 2.5 billion euro that will contribute to accelerating the deployment of renewable energies and increase its share in installed capacity to 40% of Senegal's electricity needs by 2030. One of the most effective ways to support the move towards sustainable, affordable, and accessible energy in Europe and in Africa is the promotion of joint research and innovation efforts in renewable energy and energy efficiency. Accordingly, the European Commission, EU countries, and the EU financial institutions also support the Electrification Financing Initiative. It contributes to the Africa-owned and led initiative, the African Renewable Energy Initiative, which was launched in Paris in 2015. It aims at harnessing Africa's abundant renewable energy resources to support their development strategies and leapfrog towards low-carbon economic development. The EU and South Africa also have had a strategic partnership since 2006. This partnership is broad, comprehensive, and dominated by mutual political, trade, and development interests, including sustainable climate and energy change. Both sides are working together on the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And in 2021, the EU, together with Germany, France, the UK, and the US, signed an international Just Energy Transition Partnership with South Africa in November of 2021. According to EU Climate Chief Frans Timmermans, Africa is likely to be Europe's most important partner as it looks to increase its renewable energy supply and switch to green hydrogen. So as we can see, Europe in general is working hard and constructively with the African Union, deploying major resources to develop an energy partnership that all agree, I think, is of paramount importance to all parties. So where does NATO fit into all of this? Well, first, NATO has had a working relationship, an official relationship with the African Union since 2005. At the Warsaw Summit in 2016, NATO leaders committed to increasing political and practical cooperation with the African Union. At the same time, allies also approved NATO's Framework for the South, which aims to integrate and streamline NATO's approach to tackle challenges by focusing on improved capabilities, enhanced anticipation and response, as well as boosting NATO's regional partnership and capacity building efforts. In November of 2019, NATO and the AU signed an agreement to strengthen political and practical partnerships, and in March 2020, allies approved additional cooperation initiatives with the aim of progressively maturing the NATO-African Union relationship from one of ad hoc support to more substantive practical partnership. NATO maintains a full-time liaison element with the African Union and provides technical expertise and training support in areas such as maritime, finance, monitoring, procurement, air movement coordination, communications, information technology, logistics, human resources, military manpower management, and contingency planning. And NATO, of course, coordinates its African Union-related work with bilateral partners and other international organizations, including the European Union and the United Nations. Now, while NATO activities naturally focus on security issues, the NATO-African Union relationship naturally complements European Union activities, and to the extent that it can contribute to stability on the African continent, supports the ongoing work in the energy sector that I described earlier. Of note, 23 NATO allies are also EU members, with another 4 in candidate status. Many NATO MILREPs are also dual-hatted as EU MILREPs. And all of this contributes to complementary efforts to build this relationship, a relationship that is essential to all of us going forward. So I think, as we've seen in today's discussions, Europe's future is tied inextricably to the African continent, particularly in the energy sector. The conflict in Ukraine has resulted in massive disruption and change in global energy markets, while global efforts to migrate to renewable or green energy have magnified the potential role of African states in this regard. This is a relationship that will only grow in importance as we navigate a challenging but also a promising future. NATO's relationship with Africa is only going to grow, we believe, in the interest of helping African states to build the kind of security and stability that is critical for all. Europe is divesting itself of its former reliance on Russian energy, and Africa offers exciting and promising opportunities with the added bonus of access to innovative sources of renewable energy, with all that implies for confronting climate change. This is the future for Africa, for Europe, and indeed for the international community. So with that, thank you all for your contributions today to this vital discussion. I wish you all safe travels as you return home. Thank you for your kind attention, and I look forward to future collaborations. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
So, ladies and gentlemen, signore e signori, I think we are at the end of a long afternoon. The issue that we have, I want to share this with you because many of you come often to our conferences. The problem that we have in organizing such a thing is that we have very important strategic issues. We know that if we deal with them in 2 days, as you should probably do, people would not be there, and we would lose most of the interest of the audience. And so, what we try to do at the foundation is to try to do all this as in the most possible efficient way in a few hours. And trying to be lucky. We are usually lucky because we find good speakers, and this is, large part of my work and my collaborators people like Leonardo, for instance, you know, and I thank him again for coming here. So I explain why we are imposing over you, you know, free panels and so many speeches and such a discussion, because we think that in the end it is a little bit tiring, but I come out very enriched about this. You know, today I learned a lot of things that I did not know before, and I hope it's the same for you. So, buonasera a tutti e grazie mille.